Kendall is back with us here this morning. Morning, Kendall. Morning, Elvis.
Very good morning, gentlemen.
Elvis, you look like you've got the colour back in your face, 100%.
Yes, not 90% Eben, I can tell you that. And it's, of course, a sunny sky day today, no clouds about.
No clouds about. But first up, our first question to you. As you know, we ask many questions. The Eskom board chairperson, also former chairperson here at the SABC, Dr. Benangomane, has resigned with immediate effect as the chairperson.
Yes, well, that's why we're asking you the question. The DA says that Ngobane's resignation is highly suspicious, and that's why we're asking you that question. What do you make of Ngobane's sudden resignation, we might add?
You're tweeting us, Ken.
Yeah, Mzolisi says, look, following Dr. Ngobane's resignation, the entire board should and must be dissolved by the minister. Having done so, she must resign also.
Yeah, easy calls to make. This one from Tabiso, who says, we have to make sure that he has resigned first, because he might be on an unpaid leave. The minister might montage Elvis.
Well, there you have it. Mkolisi comes back, he says Dr. Ngobane must be held accountable for the havoc that he had caused at both the SABC and Eskom. He shouldn't be allowed to just run away.
Yeah, of course, the big story. The big story's been the dismissal of SABC CEO Hlaudi Motsoeneng in the last 24 hours, Kendall, and political parties have come out and pronounced on this. It's the big story, really, and that's why we're running the poll.
Massive story. So there you have it, 242 votes, Eben. And so far, Kendall?
Well, 62% of our respondents are saying yes, Hlaudi Motsoeneng's sacking is good news for the SABC. 12% say no, but interestingly enough, a quarter say they don't care.
Interesting that surprises me, because out of 250, it's more than 50 votes that are saying I don't care. Interesting that. Kadlecha says he was bad for the SABC. In fact, how he's even employed. Our state-owned entities have bad luck of hiring incompetent people in executive positions, and he asks the question, why?
This one from Barry Martin. He says, Motsoeneng, to me, that is very good news. Hlaudi Motsoeneng shouldn't have been at the SABC in the first place.
Then we have Lechasa coming in saying Hlaudi Motsoeneng was very bad for the SABC. He should have been dismissed a long time ago.
Yeah, keep tweeting us, guys. Keep coming, keep tweeting us. That's what Newsroom's about. It's about us interacting around the big stories of the day. Bafana! Well, they're playing tonight. So we're asking the question, one swallow doesn't make a summer. Are they back in the big time? What do you think, Ken?
I think, if Stuart Baxter wanted to retire, he could do so now. He's gone and done the impossible, done what nobody else has been able to do. He beat Nigeria in Nigeria. Well done to him and the entire team.
It's the equivalent of scaling Mount Everest, really, for a South African football fan. Elvis?
Now, Mystic Man says, 2-0 over Hillbrow. Sounds promising. Baxter and the current Bafana will restore the 1996 squad and makes South Africa home of football.
We've got no chill in South Africa, I tell you that. McRob says, let's just support the team through the good and the bad times. McRob, we love a winner here in South Africa, let me tell you that.
And Pule says, Bafana plays well after new coach is appointed, like they did under Mashal. After the excitement is gone, they start losing matches as usual.
Well, I must tell you, I didn't expect that Hillbrow one, but well, there you have it.
Tough crowd. South Africans are tough. Anyhow, we've got a lot of news today, as you can understand. There's lots happening in South Africa. Let's get into our work.
The Eskom board chairperson Benangomane has resigned with immediate effect. Now the bad news now, ratings agency Moody's has downgraded 5 of South Africa's largest banks and 4 insurers with a negative outlook. And the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, is expected to open the National AIDS Conference in Durban. Now those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Quite a lot happening on the sports front. Good morning to you. Good to be back in this hot seat. This is what we've got for you today.
I just think that we played so well that we were playing what I would hope can develop into our brand of football.
Bafana come back victorious from Nigeria and hit the ground running, intent on keeping the momentum going when they face Zambia in a friendly tonight.
Arnold is ready to go.
With the French domestic league ending, the Springboks are gearing up for an expected French backlash with their own star returnees.
Huge cheers, and there it is! Sapraz has taken his team home.
Mercurial Pakistan seals off South Africa's Group B at the ICC Champions Trophy with a 3-wicket victory over Sri Lanka to qualify for the semi-finals. Stay with Elvis because he's got the news for you.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour. The Eskom board chairperson Ben Ngubane has resigned with immediate effect. Announcing his resignation, Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown thanked Ngubane for his contribution to turning Eskom around since the load-shedding days. Brown has appointed Zetemba Khoza as the interim board chairperson. Earlier yesterday, it was announced that Parliament will investigate Eskom over allegations of mismanagement in the issuing of tenders. The investigation will include the Brian Molefe saga and possible wrongdoing in the issuing of contracts to companies owned by the Gupta family. We invited Kulani Goma, Eskom's board spokesperson, but shortly before going on air informed us that the Office of the Minister of Public Enterprise instructed him not to comment any further until after the annual general meeting later this month. Meanwhile, former Eskom board chairperson Dr. Ben Ngubane has hit back at those accusing him of corporate governance failures at the SABC and Eskom. In the recent past, he said that his critics lack the facts about the tenure at the two organizations. Ngubane bore the brunt of a wave of attacks from all parties in Parliament during separate portfolio committee meetings recently. MPs said that it was under his watch that the SABC lurched into a crisis that resulted in the collapse of its board and its current state of near bankruptcy. He has also been blamed for corporate governance failures at Eskom. Speaking to SABC News earlier this morning, the current SABC board deputy chairperson Matata Tsedu says an investigation is underway on the money that was lost by the public broadcaster. Now, this follows yesterday's sacking of the SABC's former COO Hlaudi Motsoeneng. Tsedu says that the board is planning on meeting with MultiChoice to discuss matters relating to SABC News Channel 404, which you're currently watching, as well as SABC Encore.
As the initial charges that arose from the Public Protector's report, they are now moot. Because he's no longer an employee of the SABC. You can't charge somebody who is not your employee anymore. Yeah. So that falls away.
Okay.
But before these charges for which he was found guilty were instituted, the process was already underway to find a presiding officer and all the necessary people to deal with the previous charges that were mandated by the Western Cape High Court. Insofar as whether any money will be recouped, when the SIU completes its work, it will make recommendations. The SIU, as a state organ, has the power to enforce even its own rulings, which is why we went for them rather than just find somebody else.
Yeah.
So anyone who has benefited in a manner that is irregular is going to be forced to repay all the money that they shouldn't have received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The multi-choice deal. We speak about TNA, and that has now been scrapped for now. In terms of the multi-choice deal, that's another one with a big question mark over it, and people that had obviously benefited from that deal. Talk to us about that, how the investigation's going into that.
We have set up, we were actually supposed to meet with MultiChoice today. But the meeting has been postponed because we want to sit with them and just understand from their side. There are the contracts were signed in staggered form, so there is more than just one version of the contract. So we want to sit with them and just understand from the point of view of MultiChoice what they understand the whole thing to be. There's, of course, that contract with MultiChoice brought into being 404, the SABC News, and Encore. They are tied to that contract, as also is the issue around set-top boxes. So it's an onion that will need to be peeled one layer at a time so that we can also understand where it is standing. We are keen as the board to see 404 continuing, to see Anchor continuing.
Is there a chance that they will not continue, though?
I can't say now until we've met with MultiChoice. But insofar as we are concerned, we would want them to continue, and we would want to see how they can actually continue.
Hlaudi Motsoeneng's lawyer, Zolo Majavo, insists that contrary to the interim board's statement, his client was not informed about his dismissal. Now, he's expressed shock at the public broadcaster's interim board's announcement.
I am feelings neutral. I am the creation of my client's instructions. I can confirm that before I came on air, I checked yet again with Mr. Motsoeneng whether or not he has been notified. As many people have been saying, the chairman of the board, in addressing a press conference, said that they received a judgment in the morning, which they have considered and whose recommendations they have accepted, and they've communicated their decision to accept that recommendation to him. Mr. Motsoeneng said no one contacted him. I can also confirm, as his attorney of record, no one contacted me. I've also checked my emails again to see if maybe I might have missed some communication. But none of the emails that I have received have anything to do with the SABC or Mr. Motsoeneng's fate, for that matter. So I am unable to comment because I have not been able to consult with him to give him advice, and also he has not given us instructions. And until we receive formal communication from the SABC, there is not much that we can do or say about it. We don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, but we find it very curious that as early as this morning, the media had been phoning me, tweeting me, and talking about a decision and inviting my comment on a judgment, which when we adjourned on Friday, we were told it had been reserved and parties would be notified as soon as it is ready. No indication was given as to when and what time that judgment will be made available, certainly to the parties, but it seems like everybody else except me and my client does have a copy of that judgment.
Well, that's Mr. Motsoeneng's lawyer there, but that's why we're asking you the question on the poll today. Of course, it relates to Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng, and there you go. Is Hlaudi Motsoeneng sacking good news for the SABC? That's the question we pose to you. Thus far, 242 votes in. 62% of you are saying yes, it is good news, the sacking of Mr. Hlaudi Motsoeneng. 26% of you says, I don't care. Now, that is a shocking statement. 26% of you, this is the public broadcaster, this is your broadcaster, and you don't care. Well, we'll take a look at those numbers a little bit later and keep you updated as to what you are saying. Meanwhile, ratings agency Moody's, they've been in a bad mood. They've downgraded 5 of South Africa's largest banks to Baa3 with a negative outlook. This after the country's credit rating was downgraded last week. The long-term local and foreign currency deposit ratings of Standard Bank, First Rand, Absa Bank, Nedbank and Investec have been downgraded to one notch above non-investment grade. Now, the ratings agency has also downgraded Standard Bank's long-term local and foreign currency issuer ratings from Baa3 to Baa1. Moody's says that the primary reason for the downgrade is weakening credit, as well as macro profile of the government's exerting pressure on banks in what it terms a challenging operating environment characterized by a pronounced economic slowdown. Firefighters in Knysna are expected to continue operations for the remainder of the week. The fires that devastated parts of Knysna and Plettenberg Bay last week have been contained, but the firefighters were still battling flare-ups yesterday. The focus has turned mainly to relief aid and assessing the damage, with over 400 homes being destroyed in Knysna and close to 100 in Plet. Many residents have reported no running water and power to their homes due to damaged infrastructure. Meanwhile, SABC News spoke to Gift of the Givers on their role in helping the affected residents to pick up the pieces.
After we went out in a field yesterday and did assessments, we've identified that the secondary need is due to a lot of farms building or properties building. A lot of the employees, like the laborers and workers and things, are also affected. They might not have been affected by the fire directly in a way, but indirectly have been affected because where do they come to work? Where do they go? So that livelihood has been affected. We've identified few centers and we're traveling around to see where we can supply them also with humanitarian aid, especially food and things like that, which is needed urgently because without the livelihood you have no food. And that's, as the days go on, that's starting to get more and more and more because houses and things that have been destroyed, I mean insurances or people need to rebuild, that's all going to take time. So it's becoming quite a big need.
We know that relief aid has been pouring into Knysna and into the affected towns as well. Are you still seeing that kind of assistance? Are you still seeing that kind of outpouring of generosity here where your centre, this is your distribution centre, can you still see people coming and delivering more goods?
That's correct. A lot of aid is still coming into Knysna. I mean, just for us today, we're getting close to 7-8 interlink trucks coming, but that's just one distribution centre. A lot of the other distribution centres we have a communication meeting every morning. They're also receiving quite a lot of goods coming in terms of food supplies, clothing, as well as like frozen foods, perishable items coming in. And they're starting to look at the second phase where some people are now starting to give items for shelters for later on.
And also, so your relief efforts are not only just focused here in the Knysna area. You are looking at towns as far as field as Sedgefield, Plettenberg Bay. We do know, we've learned from the fire chief this morning that they are going to focus their energies and efforts in Plettenberg Bay today and possibly aerial bomb that area. What is the need looking like in Plettenberg Bay?
Plettenberg Bay as well has been quite badly affected. A lot of humanitarian aid going through. We've been sending trucks through the last 3 days and doing distributions. But what we're also doing is our medical team is going there to go and assist as well. And we're sending through as far as George, humanitarian aid, as far as PE now, humanitarian aid is going. Sedgefield, Buffalo Bay, all those areas, also humanitarian aid going. We have 1-2 of our doctors in the ambulance driving around just giving primary healthcare needs as well. So the need is going beyond George, if I can put it that way, and it's still going to continue.
Actor Jabu Christopher Kubeka, who played the role of gunman in the SABC 1 drama Yizo Yizo, has died. Kubeka's body was found in his house at Shoshanguve yesterday afternoon. It's been reported that he committed suicide. Kubeka also played the role of Bazooka Kumba in SABC 1's drama series Zone 14 and other TV dramas like Jacob's Cross and A Place Called Home. He also appeared in the soapies Generations, Zabalala, Gold Diggers, as well as in comedies like Abo Mzala, Sestopla, as well as Tandeka's Diary. The Minister of Arts and Culture, Natim Tetwa, has expressed his condolences to the family. Now, that's your news for now. Our focus today is on children flooding, foreign children flooding into South Africa. Let's start that conversation with Heben.
Yeah, thank you, Elvis. Very good morning to you if you've just joined us. Now, Gauteng Social Development MEC Nandimaya Tula-Khoza says an increasing number of Zimbabwean children in particular are coming into South Africa on their own, and it's reached crisis point. She says in the last 3 months alone, about 800 children have crossed the border at Musina into South Africa, while hundreds of other children could have crossed at other points of entry. Maya Tula-Khoza says the plight of children entering the country has reached crisis point, and this is alarming. How does this affect social services and the children themselves here in South Africa? To find out, well, we are joined by 19-year-old Caleb Mutombo from the DRC and Gauteng's Social Development MEC Nandi Maya Tula-Khoza herself. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Eben.
Morning to you, Caleb. Nice to have you with us.
Morning to you, sir.
There we go.
Fantastic.
Maybe if I can maybe ask you to set the scene for us with the story. I think it's one of those underreported stories in South Africa. Is it a crisis having these foreign children flooding into South Africa in the numbers that we're seeing?
Indeed, it is really becoming a crisis. The fact that a lot of children, especially from Zimbabwe, but a lot more of them come from other countries, other states in Africa. It could be Congo, it could be Malawi, it could be, you know, those neighboring countries in our continent. And they come here, you know, without documents. They are undocumented, which means that they are stateless. You can imagine when you are a child and you don't know what your identity is, you don't know who you are, you don't have identification. So it is a very, very big challenge that we are facing in South Africa, and we must work together to address it.
The numbers, I saw 800 in the last 3 months, but that's just a little segment of what's been happening. What are the numbers looking like? It certainly looks quite big.
It looks very big. It runs to tens of thousands of children who come to South Africa without any documentation. Sometimes they come alone, you know, because of push factors from their countries, poverty, wars, etc. And sometimes they come for greener pastures, you know, the pull factors. They want better education. Some of them want work, etc. So we're talking about tens to thousands of numbers of children. But I think we must improve the statistics in our country on these children.
Yes, certainly the capturing of the data is very important. Caleb, tell us your journey to South Africa and your story a little bit.
All right. Before I begin, I'd just like to introduce myself. I'm Caleb Mutombo. Originally from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm currently in matric, grade 12. I'm also a bodybuilder and also soon to be personal trainer, studying to be a personal trainer. I came in South Africa seeking medical attention, but we had no intention to stay here permanently. However, with the financial conflict between my family, there's been money loss, and therefore my parents have decided to leave us here with grandmother and go back to Congo and work. But with the deteriorating political situation within the Congo itself, my parents found themselves stranded without work, leaving us here with grandmother. When I was in 2nd grade, my grandfather died, and my grandmother said she could not bear them burying him without her presence. She had to see him one last time. So she left us here abandoned with no one to take care of us. And then, so since then, we have not been able to go to Home Affairs and get our stamps. Now, the issue with that is we've been stateless since then. And then my auntie came over and she began taking care of us and just took us to Home Affairs and we explained the story. And they were okay with it. But then later on, she also abandoned us. Then my sister came, and when she tried to get legal guardianship of us, they would not give it to her. And since then, we've been seeing social workers. We've also written a letter to the Minister of Home Affairs and have not gotten a reply since. It has been very difficult, especially with being in matric at this current moment. Trying to write my matric. They would allow me to write my matric, they say they will, but I need to have correct documentation to collect my results.
Yeah, that puts you in a sort of catch-22 situation a little bit.
Sure.
Ma'am, if I can ask you, how do we resolve these kinds of stories? Because it seems as if we have quite a few of them.
We definitely have quite a few of them. I think we need to assist them, first of all, as parents. You know, documentation of parents in the first instance is very, very important. We really encourage asylum seekers, refugees, you know, to go to Home Affairs so that they can be, you know, documented, for the children as well to be documented. So we are saying that, for example, there are South Africans as well who don't have documents. So we are saying that, you know, children must get their birth certificate as soon as they are, you know, they are born. They shouldn't leave the hospitals before they get this, you know, their birth certificate, so that it can be easy for them to get access to education. We have a responsibility as government to ensure that these children get access to social services, healthcare, education, shelter. These are the rights that are entrenched in our own constitution. But sometimes without documentation, they really reach a deadlock.
We're seeing pictures now on screen, ma'am, of people crossing through Beitbridge, and we've got, of course, other border posts all around South Africa. The children, some of them, they come in alone, unaccompanied. How do they travel to South Africa unaccompanied? Is it on the back of an illegal framework? How does it work?
Yes, some children travel unaccompanied to South Africa. Of course, I mean, they do it at the back of illegal framework. They cross, you know, the border gate, and we know about Musina.
Yeah.
They don't go through the right, you know, border gate channel. So that's why we are also saying that we really request the Home Affairs to tighten up, to manage the border control system better than they are doing right now, because it's dangerous for the children.
Yeah.
You can imagine using these dangerous spaces, anything can happen to them. So that's why we're really appealing to Home Affairs to help us.
Caleb, once you got to once you're here in South Africa, how difficult is it as a stateless person to live a normal life, to find a school, to do the things that sometimes people take for granted, I would think?
In my case, I can say it can be very difficult. I remember coming in, I mean, I was lucky enough to at least have some documents at some point, and only by the grace and mercy of God that I was put in school, and I'm seeing my way forth. But at the moment, it's reaching the line where you really don't see a way forth here. Especially, I remember all the time going to Home Affairs, trying to sort this out, going to court, doing all of that. It's a real challenge that I think no child should have to face.
Yeah.
Being outside. Also, I think the solution to this problem would be to protect the borders, because once someone comes in, then the Constitution says that you are the responsibility of the government. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing, I would think, for any child. But the children that come into South Africa, ma'am, we don't want to call it a burden, but surely there's an element of resources that need to be allocated in order to assist them. Do we have that facility, and are we doing enough to help them?
Indeed, we are correct. We don't want to call it a burden, because we have a responsibility in this country, because we normally say that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, including those who come to this country, you know, for asylum purposes, refugee, or even undocumented. We have a responsibility to assist those children. So we, as social development, have a role to play. For example, many of these children's cases would go to courts. Yeah. So our social workers will assist their children, but many at times these cases are not finalized because of lack of documentation. So that's why we now have to work very, very close with Home Affairs. But then we have a responsibility to ensure that if the parents are not there, then we take these children to places of safety. We have child and youth care centers where we take the children so that they can be taken good care of. We have the foster care system as well. But we have good people of South Africa who would say, let me also adopt these children. So these are some of the, you know, the programs that we have, you know, to assist our children who are in South Africa, undocumented or stateless. So yes, we do have challenges such as resources, human resources, financial resources, and that's why we are saying at least we need to have more resources so that we can take care of the socio-economic challenges that these children end up experiencing. The number of social workers. Social workers get stretched. As you know, we have a shortage of social workers in South Africa. But it's not a burden. We need to work together with all those who are involved to address these challenges.
And finally, are South Africans welcoming?
Are South Africans welcoming? I'd say some. I remember growing up, I was called names by the youth around myself. I was called Makwere Kwere, as you know it. But then again, I was welcomed by other scholars at school. I enjoyed my schooling. I have made many friends. Very popular guy.
You look a very popular guy.
Thank you very much. Yes, of course.
Yeah, fantastic. It's nice to have you with us, Caleb. Caleb Mutombo is a 19-year-old stateless child here in South Africa now. He's joined us this morning to share his story. Thank you for sharing the story with us. And then, of course, the Social Development MEC here in Gauteng, Nandi Mayatula Khoza. Ma'am, thank you very much for coming in today.
Thank you so much.
Yep, it is a concern. Can you imagine traveling as a 7-year-old, 10-year-old on your own into a country unknown, not knowing everything? As an adult, it's scary to do that. Can you imagine being 10 years old, 7 years old even, and doing that? Incredible stories. Anyhow, We've got a lot of news today, and the man that is right in the middle of all of it today, of course, is Dr. Ben Ngubane. He overnight stepped down from his position as well as the chairperson of the board of Eskom. We've asked you the question, what do you make of Dr. Ben Ngubane's resignation? Of course, there's been lots of pronouncements from opposition parties and the like, as you've seen. You guys are tweeting us on it. Colin Mabuza says to us, Newsroom, good governance and his board must follow him. Yeah, lots of tough tweets today, not holding back. The Big M Michael says, great news indeed, because he's part of the problem at Eskom, even though another problem will be hired. Wow, that's tough. The class of 76 says, I don't think he's resigned because the jokes that's going on at Eskom is totally unacceptable. Utterances are nonsensical. Barry Martin says, Eskom's Ben Ngubane see that the only way to run away from his corrupt activities is to resign. Of course, there have been opposition parties who said that will not be the case. There will be a full investigation and that will be in due course. Now, let's move on and take a look at what's happening on social media this morning. Now, this is a story that's really disturbing in Cape Town. The hashtag is Metro Rail. In Cape Town, several trains are delayed this morning following last night's arson and vandalism attacks there at Cape Town Station. Windows of shops were broken and a Vodacom shop entry and exits were damaged after delays, and people were unhappy with the delays, so they just went on the rampage. Can you imagine that? Now you're on the rampage for late trains, so you destroy the infrastructure and then you expect them to be on time the next day. I can't get my head around it. Anyhow, seems to be a lot of angry people in South Africa. Then Eskom's chairperson that we've just spoken about, Dr. Ben Ngubane, has resigned. He was, allegedly named in some of the latest email leak sagas. Then in sport, the Proteas' best was not good enough against India at the weekend, leaving, of course, a trail of destruction on social media as many people have used the much maligned C word to describe their performances. And this picture kind of talks to what happened on Sunday. Moving further afield, the 6.3 magnitude earthquake shook the Greek island of Lesbos. Tremors were felt in Athens and Istanbul. Some reports suggest that at least one person has died. That's the Lesbos quake. Also, the US remembers the one-year anniversary of the Pulse nightclub massacre. Yeah, 49 people were gunned down in the Pulse nightclub. It's still trending on social media right now. Let's take a look at, what is happening with our picture of the day. Yeah, the picture of the day, this is it. It talks to that very disturbing story, of course, in Cape Town last night. There you see the trail of destruction, cars overturned, shops looted, infrastructure broken, and also trains set alight. Now follows our comment of the day, this one from Serge. And Serge says something that I think we all can kind of identify with. Vandalizing what we have is not the way to go, says Serge. Simple. Think about those people that come after us. Think about how we're traveling the next day, those people that have to get to work today. They won't be able to because the trains are late. Why? Because they've been set alight. We're going to take a short break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
Today on Rights and Recourse, we will unpack the new transitional court code.
The idea of the bill is not to overregulate, to basically set the principles.
The most important aspect of this bill is that it understands that customary law by its nature is consensual, that I have a right to affiliate, I have a right therefore to opt in, and I have a right to opt out.
The opt-out provision is basically one that you've got to respect the court in the sense of if you've been summoned You've got to tell the clerk of the court at least that you're not willing to attend.
The challenge that I would like to throw to the Department of Justice, it has to come up with mechanisms of ensuring that people who exercise their right to opt out or to opt in are not in any way victimized.
Hashtag Rights with Dumila Mates on legal issues every Sunday at 2 o'clock Central African Time.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
Let's continue on our theme looking at stateless children. According to Lawyers for Human Rights, childhood statelessness in South Africa is a generally unaddressed, largely preventable, but a growing phenomenon. Last year, the Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein gave the Department of Home Affairs 18 months to streamline regulations which will make it easier for stateless children to apply for citizenship. Now, this was sparked by an application on behalf of an 8-year-old girl that was born in Cape Town in 2008 of Cuban descent and parents. Now, she was born in South Africa, but Home Affairs refused to register her as a South African. Now, this was because neither of her parents were South Africans. Now, to find out just how prevalent are such cases, we are joined from our Pretoria studios by Lusunga Kanyama Piri, legal counsellor, refugee and migrant rights statelessness project. A very good morning to you, Ms. Piri, and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
First and foremost, I would like you to explain to us briefly the concept of a statelessness child. Is it a person that's born in the country without parents, or is it somebody that maybe come across the border with no documents?
Okay, so a stateless person, and which in this case can also be a stateless child, is somebody who is not recognized as a national by any government under the operation of its laws.
So what does that then mean for the individual if they, in this case of the Cuban parents, where the child was born in South Africa and the Home Affairs refused to register the child as South African?
Well, as a stateless person, you can't access nationality, first of all. And then also to follow up, you then can't access any rights in terms of any constitution. So like rights like basic education, healthcare, those are things that you wouldn't be able to access if you're not recognized as a national of any country.
How prominent is the issue of statelessness here in South Africa?
I think it's a very important issue because, as I said earlier, as a stateless person, you are not considered a national of any country, can't access any rights. And in the South African context, I mean, if you're not a national and you also can't access documentation, then it means that you, for children especially, then can't access education. Because we see a lot of children unable to register for school because they don't have relevant documentation, they don't have birth certificates or any documents to register in school.
How many cases particularly are you aware of in South Africa that where you find stateless persons or children?
Through our law clinics, we assist approximately 500 people a year, and most of those are children. And actually, South African children also form a large number of these children. We've had outreach programs where we've gone to Aliwal North, for instance, and we've interviewed like 70 children, majority of which were South African, who just couldn't access documentation.
Are we likely to see this phenomenon of stateless children and persons increase here in South Africa due to instability in other African states and our neighbors?
Yes, statelessness does have a correlation to documentation.
Now,
and it can, yes, statelessness
continue.
does correlate to the. It can correlate to seeing a lot of people coming into the country. Excuse me, I don't think I understand your question. Can you please repeat it?
I'm just saying that, you know, we've seen the increase of instability in other African countries. Would we see this phenomenon of statelessness increase in South Africa, you think?
Oh, I see. Well, I think statelessness does have a correlation to instability in the countries, in that when states are unstable, for instance, people cannot access birth registration, and therefore they're not documented. And also you see that when states are in conflict, usually nationality is used to discriminate against certain people, in the sense that they will be denied their nationality. And also in state succession, you'll find that people then can't access nationality.
Now, since the department's commitment last year to address the problem of stateless children in South Africa by allowing them to apply for citizenship, what has since transpired?
Well, the matter is actually still ongoing. Following their decision to accommodate stateless children, the department has actually rescinded the High Court judgment, so meaning we'll still be in court to finalize this matter, and as a result, stateless children remain vulnerable. I mean, we are hopeful that there will be a positive outcome at the end of the tunnel, and we're looking at this as an opportunity to just learn and grow and move forward from. There have been recommendations from the Committee on the Convention of the Rights of the Child, as well as the Universal Periodic Review on South Africa recently, that has suggested or recommended to South Africa that they sign on to the 2 statelessness conventions, and also just amend their nationality legislation and birth registration legislation, so as to include children and not to leave anyone undocumented. So we're very hopeful that at the end of this case, we will have a pathway on how to deal with such cases and to avoid a situation where children are left stateless.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned earlier that you handle about 500 cases per year. Now, for a person finding themselves this morning, as we speak, in that particular position where they are stateless rather, what advice would you give to them, and what are the first steps that they should take?
Well, in a situation like Caleb's, for instance, in the absence of any specific legislation to address statelessness in South Africa, we look to the Immigration Act, and we would then make an exemption application to the Minister of Home Affairs, explaining the special circumstances of the person in question, and then implore on the Minister to grant that person permanent residence as a pathway to nationality.
Mm-hmm. If people want to get hold of you, how do they get hold of your advice in relation to refugees and migrant rights?
We have offices in Johannesburg, in Braamfontein, and also in Pretoria. If you go to our website, that's www.lhr.org.za, you should find our details there.
I thank you so much for your time in joining us, Ms. Piri.
Thank you.
Now that was Lusunga Kanyama Piri. She's the legal counselor, Refugee and Migrant Rights of Statelessness Project, on the line to us there in our Pretoria studios. Well, we're also conducting a poll, of course, today, not in relation to statelessness, but rather on a cloud that was hanging over the SABC. We're asking you, is Hlaudi Motsoeneng sacking good news for the SABC? So far, updated poll, 302 votes in. You have 22 hours to vote. Still, 62% of you are saying yes. The sacking of Mr. Motsoeneng is good news for the SABC. 12% says no. Derek Howell says, and 26% of course says I don't care. Derek Howell says, how come it took so long for the SABC to discover that 5 billion rand disappeared? Surely the finance department must have known this. Malibongwe says, Hlaudi never shown any respect after he was suspended. He is just bad news. Kolisi says, the current interim board has just restored the public confidence to the public broadcaster. I don't regret paying my TV license. So says Kolisi. Kolisi, it is the right thing to do, as you know. Mystic Man says, yes, but he can't be a scapegoat. His accomplice must be charged. Well, there you have it. These are some of your comments. You can keep them coming and we'll read them as we continue. Let's now take a look at the front pages of the newspapers from around the globe. And we start off in New York, where the Wall Street Journal reports that police yesterday detained hundreds of anti-corruption protesters across Russia, including opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who was hoping to harness a surprise surge in rallies against the Kremlin to challenge President Vladimir Putin in elections next year. Moving to Australia, the Australian says that Islamic State's official spokesman has called for Australians to launch terrorist attacks during the holy month of Ramadan. Moving to China, the South China Morning Post reports that Panama has switched formal diplomatic ties to mainland China and broken with Taipei, dealing a major setback to Taiwan and boosting Beijing's presence in the US backyard. Now, those are some of the headlines from the newspapers from around the globe. Let's now take a look at what's happening on our Facebook page. The Kucha municipality in the Eastern Cape outside Port Elizabeth has been declared a disaster area following a special council meeting yesterday. Then we also see the former National Police Commissioner Ria Piecha says that the fact that her 5-year term of office has ended does not mean she will abandon her court challenge against the Farlam and Claassen reports. And then finally, 3 suspects have appeared in the Leborde Magistrates Court in the Eastern Cape in connection with the kidnapping and murder of a little girl from school last week. You can find all of these stories on our Facebook page. But right now, let's take a break and we'll be right back after that.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
I'm Alicia Jali, joining us live from our Johannesburg studios. A quick look now at your current news leaders. Parliament's Communications Committee has decided on 5 names to sit on the SABC's interim board. And the Constitutional Court has directed Social Development Minister Bathabile Dlamini and her department to account for their handling of the social grants contract.
And in tennis, Serena Williams has withdrawn from the BNP Paribas Open in Indian Wells and the Miami Open due to a left knee injury.
We're expecting it to move just in towards the southern parts of the country, not so much coming towards southern Africa, not even touching the Mozambique channel. It's just going to move back towards the Indian Ocean.
Stay tuned to News Today, Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
Yeah, welcome back. Bafana achieved what, well, wasn't thought possible. After quite a few attempts over the last 20-odd years, they beat Nigeria in a competitive match away from home. It was a shock to me. It was a shock to Kendall.
It was massive. It was a massive shock. It was one of the biggest, and that's why I think this picture says it all. This picture says all. Like Bafana fans are right now over the moon. Yeah. Purely because Stuart Baxter and his cohorts did something that nobody thought possible in our lifetime. We tried several times under very many different coaches to actually beat Nigeria in a match that mattered.
Yeah.
And they did it. 2-0 it was, and there wasn't a single penalty in that mix.
Now, we received a very interesting tweet a little bit earlier, and I want to repeat it to you because one of our viewers tweeted us and said the following. Said, we always play well after a new coach is appointed, and then it sort of fizzles out after that. What do you make of that? Is that what we're going to see? Guys, we'll take the tweet shortly.
One is hoping that that's not going to be the case. The honest truth that there's a lot to say for that particular tweet. It's verifiable. It has happened exactly that way. We're even looking at Stuart Baxter's record. Yes, this is his second stint. And you know what? He didn't even get a 50% the last time out. Out of 23 matches, he won only 10 when he was coach for the first time, 2004, 2005, thereabouts. So 43.5% win rate 4 draws in that mix. So with that said, that's in the past. That's some 12, 13 years ago.
Yeah.
He's had a lot of experience in the interim. He's won the league with Kaizer Chiefs. He's doing extremely well for himself. And you know what? I think he deserves to be given a chance. This is the only time I will say this person deserves to be given a chance, because I don't believe in chances at the national team level. But I think he's the right man for the job now.
What was impressive for me at the weekend was the fact that not only did we win, but we played Nigeria off the park. We hit the bar twice. They never really had a sniff, and this was away.
This was away. This was we were somewhere where we'd almost beaten them previously and gotten a 2-2 draw. We gave it away, but they managed to close out the game. They managed to get into the lead, hold on to the lead, close out the game, control the park, and make Nigeria hold 2 emergency meetings this week. The Nigerian FA is holding 2 emergency meetings because in their reckoning, it wasn't a loss to South Africa.
We used to have the emergency meetings after Nigeria matches. It's good to see that there. But let's just have a look at the tweets, because we're sending you guys, we've asked you guys a question about whether this is Bafana's back in the big time. And this is the one I spoke about. He said Pule says Bafana plays well after a new coach is appointed, like they did under Mashaba. After the excitement is gone, they start losing matches as usual. Is that a negative sentiment, or is that an informed football opinion?
You know, that's an informed South African football fan opinion. Because for so long, we've, like you said in the intro, when you started talking about in this segment, after numerous attempts of some 20-odd years, South Africa for the first time gets to beat Nigeria. Yeah. We're all used to it. We've seen it happen. We saw what happened under Sheikh Mashaba. Did extremely well in the qualifiers for AFCON, and then went on to not even get out of the first round.
Let's take the tweets the guys are tweeting us. Nazim Grootboom Unati says, we played very well, but if they can keep that, we are in it. Bafana, new era, he says. Vachasa says, let's thank the good work done by the coach, because we're going to complain in the future. Eish, soccer fans are unpredictable, especially in South Africa, you should say.
But so are the Bafana performances, we shouldn't forget that. Netsezo says, yes, I believe they're back. The way they crucified Nigeria was excellent play, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're all surprised by what has been a terrific performance. Calvin says, still too early. We've got a long way to go. Let them play before we criticize or praise, for that matter. Calvin, you know, we are very quick on the draw here in South Africa. That's just the nature of the beast. Kendall, thanks for coming in. Kendall will give you a complete sports update at about 10:35, 40. Today, also a little bit later, some interesting interviews, sports interviews, that is. But time now for us to go over to Tsietse to give us a weather update.
Hello there, welcome from the weather desk. It is expected to be another warm day here in South Africa, although it's still we're expecting a cold front towards the southwestern parts, and should bring cooler conditions for the Western Cape province as well as some parts of the Eastern Cape. A bit of rain coming your way towards that east coast of Madagascar, and also along the east coast of the southern regions from Mozambique all the way towards Tanzania. Otherwise, clear, fine days expected right across the interior. And the cold front will bring cooler conditions towards the Western Cape, and by tomorrow, up to 60% chance of rainfall in those regions. Let's take a look at your temperatures. Quite a warm start for all those that are going to be in Upington. Temperatures already along the upper teens, and you're expecting an afternoon high of about 26 degrees. But if you're going to be in Mbombela, Skukuza, as well as Malamulele along Mpumalanga, and then over into the Limpopo province, do expect hot temperatures there. Your maximum this afternoon will go as high as 31. Cool weather for Sutherland and Cape Town at 15. Springbok is reaching a maximum of only 18 today. Now from the west coast along Walvis Bay and Luderitz, temperatures along the lower 20s towards the eastern coast, where Beira and Nampula will experience even hotter temperatures, about 31, with possibilities of rain towards Nampula. And also cooler conditions just continue along Antananarivo, Port Louis, and into Victoria, including Moroni. Those are along your upper 20s, so it's going to be quite hot along those parts. And we're seeing possibilities of rain coming up towards the far northern parts, into Banjul, as well as over Libreville. Otherwise, along the central interior and going down towards the southern parts, it's just going to be quite clear. Nothing in terms of rainfall expected there. Lilongwe, Lusaka, for all those that are going to be in Maun, as well as some parts of Windhoek in Namibia, do you expect some sunny conditions there. Juba along South Sudan is at a maximum of 35. And once again, we're seeing now stronger chance of rainfall along the west coast of Africa, Lots and lots of rainfall expected along these regions. And then again, a small chance for Morocco, but just do expect a humid day and possibilities of cloud cover coming up there. By tomorrow, Nigeria will also see the majority of rainfall coming through towards the west there. Khartoum reaches a maximum 46, 41 for Agadez, and 46 towards Riyadh. Yeah, strong summer temperatures are felt towards the Middle East, as well as over the central part of places such as Niger, Mali, and for all those that are going to be in Algeria. Quite a hot day is expected for Algiers at 32 degrees. Yaoundé is at 27, 28 for Lagos and Abidjan. And again, possibilities of rain towards the west. That's where I'll leave it for your weather. Don't forget our weather details on there if you need to communicate with us. Otherwise, I'll be back again later. Stay tuned.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
Did you know that hippopotamus are susceptible to sunburn and spend most of their sunny days with only their noses out of the water whilst the rest of their body is immersed in water? Their noses have special flaps that close when submerged and can stay underwater for 25 minutes. The hippopotamus is the third largest living land mammal after the elephant and the white rhino. The hippo is 13 feet long and up to 5 feet tall, and the female weighs up to 655 kilograms. The hippopotamus is a grazer, eats up to 40 kilograms of grass at night, and it has a life expectancy of only 50 years.
Campaign that is as a result of a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant to Good Business in Saatchi, South Africa. We've developed this campaign specifically to encourage the prevention of the bacterium. And this is aimed at people around anybody who coughs, for them to tell the person who coughs, hey Bowena, use your elbow. Motivation was really coming from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, who are involved in a number of projects in South Africa. And one of the biggest challenges, as previously been said, is TB in South Africa. And the motivation is to affect behavior change, particularly with people who cough and who may be carrying the bacterium. So encouraging people to use the elbow clearly would reduce the spread of that airborne bacterium. Because the bacteria can live for 24 hours plus, you know, when you cough on your hands, you invariably touch hard surfaces or other people's hands and thereby spreading the bacteria. When you use your elbow though, it significantly reduces that risk because most of the bacterium that you coughed out stays on your elbow or on your sleeve. It's such a light-hearted, easy way to get people to change their behavior, and therefore we believe it would be successful.
When you have a cough, or if you have chest pains, think about your friends, think about your friends. When you feel a fever, or if you sweat at night, look out for the signs, look out for the signs. I go when I hate, use your elbow when you cough. I go when I hate, use your elbow when you cough. Hey, hey, Nina, hey, use your elbow when you cough. Hey, hey, Nina, hey, use your elbow when you cough.
Yeah, welcome back. We're live from Johannesburg. It's 10 o'clock. That's Central African time. Myself and Kendall are here.
Yeah, quite a lot to talk about in the sporting front. Quite a lot happened over the weekend. I missed Monday, but I'm glad I'm here today.
Yeah, Monday problems. He's got Monday problems, this guy. Anyhow, today's, well, a couple of big stories today. Eskom's board chairperson, of course, Dr. Ben Ngubani's resigned with immediate effect as the chairperson. That's a question, Kendall, that we've been posing to our viewers.
And we're wanting to find out from our viewers, what do you make of Ben Ngubani's sudden resignation?
Michael says, great news indeed, because he's part of the problem at Eskom, even though another problem will be hired. Oh, that's an interesting sentiment.
Jan Mulomo says an immediate resignation at 23:05. That's 11:05 p.m. That's weird.
Yeah, Hampshire says another wasted valuable time would require more effort and resource to undo the loss of Ben Ngubani's resignation. Hampshire. We're also running, of course, the question or the poll. Our poll today is around, well, Hlaudi Motsoeneng, who was dismissed by the SABC yesterday. Kendall, we're running this poll and people are voting feverishly on it.
Lots of passionate people about this one. 321 votes that have come in, whereas 62%, the overwhelming majority, is saying yes, it's good that Hlaudi Motsoeneng, it's good for the SABC that Motsoeneng has been sacked.
Yes, no indifference with Hlaudi Motsoeneng. It's a man who's polarized opinion. Thabo tweets us. Thabo says, no, the sacking is bad. We have succumbed again to economy masters' pressures, says Thabo Mutlo.
Michael Bigham's Toilet weighs in on this one as well. It says it makes no difference and won't change the state of the SABC overnight.
Mzolis, he says, the current interim board has just restored public confidence to the public broadcaster. I don't regret paying my TV license. Thank you, Mzolise. Keep paying your TV license. All of you watching, keep paying the TV license. It's the right thing to do. Anyhow, Bafana, are they back in the big time, Kendall?
Well, you know what? That's the big question, isn't it? Because they've got a friendly against Zambia tonight. Want to see if they can carry that momentum. But that is the question we're asking our viewers. Are Bafana back in the big time?
Tell you what, I think that Zambia, a very good side. I think they'll put out a good side tonight just to make a point after this weekend, no doubt about that. This one from Matthias, who says, yes, I believe they're back. The way they crucified Nigeria was excellent play.
I was very well organized both in defense and offense. Barry Martin says, I believe that Bafana will succeed. Just be positive and focus on the game. Just don't be negative and good luck.
And this one from Google Nyao says, not yet, until we reach at least the semi-final of a major tournament like AFCON. Though it's good to beat Nigeria. I think that kind of encapsulates the sentiment, or the correct sentiment. Yeah, it's all about winning silverware and doing well in the big tournaments. Anyhow, Kendall, let's get into our work this morning. 10:03 now, time for our top stories. Eskom board chairperson Dr. Ben Ngubani has resigned with immediate effect. Ratings agency Moody's has downgraded 5 of South Africa's largest banks and 4 insurers with a negative outlook. Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa is expected to open the National AIDS Conference in Durban a little bit later this morning. Those are the top stories in news. Right now, let's go over to Kendall for sport.
Evan, thank you very much. Quite a lot happening in the world of sports, and it's Tuesday. We're still very busy in this desk. Good morning to you. This is what we have for you in the sports today.
I just think that we played so well that we were playing what I would hope can develop into our brand of football.
Bafana come back victorious from Nigeria and hit the ground running, intent on keeping the momentum going when they face Zambia in a friendly tonight.
I'm always ready to go.
With the French domestic league ending, the Springboks are gearing up for an unexpected French backlash with their own star returnees.
Huge cheers, and there it is! Sapraz has taken his team home.
And Mercurial Pakistan seals off South Africa's Group B at the ICC Champions Trophy with a 3-wicket victory over Sri Lanka to qualify for the semi-finals. More detail I've got on all these stories at 10:40. Be sure to stick around. stay with Evan because he's got the news.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kendall. If you've just joined us, good morning to you. There's a lot going on the news desk today. Of course, the top story, Eskom board chairperson Dr. Ben Ngubane has resigned with immediate effect. Announcing his resignation, Public Enterprises Minister Lynn Brown thanked Ngubane for his contribution to turning Eskom around since the load-shedding days. Brown has appointed Zetembe Khoza as the interim board chairperson. Earlier yesterday, it was announced that Parliament will investigate Eskom over allegations of mismanagement in the issuing of tenders. The investigation will include the Brian Molefe saga and possible wrongdoing in the issuing of contracts to companies owned by the Gupta family. We invited Kulani Koma, Eskom's board spokesperson, but shortly before going on, he informed us that the Office of the Minister of Public Enterprises instructed him not to comment any further until after the annual general meeting later this month. Meanwhile, former Eskom board chairperson Dr. Ben Ngubane has hit back at those accusing him of corporate governance failures at the SABC and Eskom. In the recent past, he said his critics lacked the facts about his tenure at the two organisations. Ngubane bore the brunt of a wave of attacks from all parties in Parliament during separate portfolio committee meetings recently. MPs said it was under his watch that the SABC lurched into a crisis that resulted in the collapse of its board and the current state of near bankruptcy. He's also been blamed for corporate governance failures at Eskom. Speaking to SABC News earlier this morning, current SABC board deputy chairperson Matata Tsedu says an investigation is underway on the money lost by the public broadcaster. This follows yesterday's sacking of its former COO Hlaudi Motsoeneng. Tsedu says the board is planning on meeting with MultiChoice to discuss matters relating to SABC News, Channel 404 and SABC Encore.
Insofar as the initial charges that arose from the Public Protector's report, they are now moot because he's no longer an employee of the SABC. You can't charge somebody who is not your employee anymore. Yeah. So that falls away.
Okay.
But before these charges for which he was found guilty were instituted, the process was already underway to find a presiding officer and all the necessary people to deal with the previous charges that were mandated by the Western Cape High Court. Insofar as whether any money will be recouped, when the SIU completes its work, it will make recommendations. The SIU, as a state organ, has the power to enforce even its own rulings, which is why we went for them rather than just find somebody else.
Yeah.
So anyone who has benefited in a manner that is irregular is going to be forced to repay all the money that they shouldn't have received.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The MultiChoice deal. We speak about TNA, and that has now been scrapped for now. In terms of the MultiChoice deal, that's another one with a big question mark over it, and people that had obviously benefited from that deal. Talk to us about that, how the investigation's going into that.
We have set up, we were actually supposed to meet with MultiChoice today, but the meeting has been postponed. Because we want to sit with them and just understand from their side. There are the contracts were signed in staggered form, so there is more than just one version of the contract. So we want to sit with them and just understand from the point of view of MultiChoice what they understand the whole thing to be. There's of course that. Contract with MultiChoice brought into being 404, the SABC News, and Encore. They are tied to that contract, as also is the issue around set-top boxes. So it's an onion that will need to be peeled one layer at a time so that we can also understand where it is standing. We are keen as the board to see 404 continuing, to see Encore continuing.
Is there a chance that they will not continue though?
I can't say now until we've met with MultiChoice. Okay. But insofar as we are concerned, we would want them to continue and we would want to see how they can actually continue.
Hlaudi Motsoeneng's legal representative, Advocate Zola Majavu, insists that contrary to the interim board statement, his client was not informed about his dismissal. He's expressed shock at the public broadcaster's interim board announcement.
Lawyer, I am feelings neutral. I am the creation of my client's instructions. I can confirm that before I came on air, I checked yet again with Mr. Motsoeneng whether or not he has been notified. As many people have been saying, the chairman of the board, in addressing a press conference, said that they received a judgment in the morning, which they have considered and whose recommendations they have accepted, and they've communicated their decision to accept that recommendation to him. Mr. Motsoeneng said no one contacted him. I can also confirm, as his attorney of record, no one contacted me. I've also checked my emails again to see if maybe I might have missed some communication. But none of the emails that I have received have anything to do with the SABC or Mr. Motsoeneng's fate, for that matter. So I am unable to comment because I have not been able to consult with him to give him advice, and also he has not given us instructions. And until we receive formal communication from the SABC, there is not much that we can do or say about it. We don't want to cast aspersions on anybody, but we find it very curious that as early as this morning, the media had been phoning me, tweeting me, and talking about a decision and inviting my comment on a judgment, which when we adjourned on Friday, we were told it had been reserved and parties would be notified as soon as it is ready. No indication was given as to when and what time that judgment will be made available, certainly to the parties, but it seems like everybody else except me and my client does have a copy of that judgment.
Of course, we've been running a poll since this morning, before the start of the show, really, with regards to this story. It's a story that's very much on the front pages today around South Africa. We've been asking you, is Hlaudi Motsoeneng's sacking good news for the SABC? Now, we've got 327 votes in, and just under two-thirds are saying, yes, it's a good thing. 12% are saying no, with 26% saying they don't really care about this. Now, we move on. Democratic Alliance leader Mmusi Maimane is to hold a joint media briefing this morning here in Johannesburg on the latest with regards to the Helen Zille emails debacle. Zille was suspended last week from all DA activities. She will later face a disciplinary hearing for bringing the party's name into disrepute. Now, to give us an update, let's go live to our reporter, Aldrin St-Pierre. Very good morning to you, Aldrin.
Well, good morning, Eben. Yes, we're expecting that announcement to be happening any minute from now with the leader of the DA, Mmusi Maimane, who has already arrived. Haven't spotted Helen Zille as yet, but it would be quite interesting what exactly Helen Zille will be saying when she responds or when she speaks to this reported apology that is expected. Quite interesting, though, is that one would argue that it was a missed opportunity by the DA, and of course, also including Helen Zille, that this could have been a matter that was solved back in March already, and there was no need to protect this entire debacle with regards to the tweet that she sent out back in March already, considering what it has done to the DA. We heard yesterday as well from James Self indicating that there was an internal poll that the DA has done, and it has indicated that this debacle has had some impact on the DA's popularity amongst the electorate. While the DA has certainly said that the question is Project 2019, that's the focus that they are on at the moment. But when Helen Zille makes that apology, it'd be quite interesting considering that even in the submissions that she had made to FedEx just ahead of her suspension from the party, if you look at paragraph 21 of that submission, where she says the formal attempts to resolve the matter that you referred to have all involved condition that I resign as Premier or plead guilty to an offence through apologizing for an offence that I did not commit, which would open the way for my expulsion from the party. Well, this is quite interesting. If she apologizes now, does this mean that she still believes that this would open the door for an expulsion, or does this political deal that she's reached with the party mean that she remains a member of the DA, however, also still keeping her title as the Premier of the Western Cape? What one can certainly not shy away from is that although the DA has reached the settlement, we know what political implications it has had, not only with regards to its coalition with the EFF, but also within the Western Cape itself, where the ANC is trying to push for a motion of no confidence against Helen Zille.
Aldrin, I wanted to ask you about this morning first. This press conference, it was mooted at first as a Musi Maimane press conference. Am I learning from you now that they will be appearing jointly?
Yes, certainly that's what we have been told, that the expectation is that she will make an apology publicly and apologize to South Africans as well. That's the reports that we've been receiving this morning. And as I've indicated before, that this could have been done way back in March already, and the party wouldn't have found itself in this situation where it finds itself at the moment, or certainly a lost opportunity. And even though, if you look into the submissions again that Helen Zille made, where she speaks about a possible court case, and it seems as though that this political deal that they might have reached could settle that matter, and that matter might have been settled outside of court as well.
Aldrin, thank you very much for that update. We'll be crossing live there as soon as that gets underway. Should be very interesting what happens there this morning. Aldrin St. Pierre right in the thick of it as always. Now, we move on. Firefighters in Knysna are expected to continue operations for the remainder of the week, we're told. The fires that devastated parts of Knysna and Plettenberg Bay last week have been contained, but firefighters are still battling flare-ups since yesterday. The focus has turned mainly to relief aid now and assessing the damage, with more than 400 homes being destroyed in Knysna and close to 100 in Plet. Many residents have reported no running water and power to their homes due to damaged infrastructure. Now, firefighters in the Southern Cape, they continue to monitor pockets of small smouldering fires in the town, most of which they say have been contained. Since last week, of course, we've reported that, well, more than 400 structures have been destroyed and 7 people are confirmed dead in the devastating fires. Our reporter, Vanessa Puna, is at the Knysna municipality right now. Very good morning to you, Vanessa. Just tell us, what's the latest there?
Eben, yes, good morning to you. Here at the Knysna municipality, just behind me, we do know that the Joint Operations Centre meeting is currently taking place. I've managed to secure a very short interview with disaster manager Richard Meyer, who will just tell us a bit about the relief efforts and also about the rebuilding efforts here in Knysna. Very warm good morning to you, Richard. I know that we've delayed you quite a bit. I know that they are going to probably scold you in that meeting there just now. But if you'll just tell us, obviously, we know that the attention has turned to assessment of damage and also to rebuilding. In terms of those assessments, what can you tell us this morning?
So from yesterday, we clustered it into different working groups for infrastructure, social development. So in that, they are looking at the different assessment that needs to happen. So it already started yesterday. By the end of the week, we'll probably have a good idea and not finish it, but hopefully getting it finished. And then from there, go into the priority areas, out of that assessment priorities, and out of that priorities, then start with the work. And there's some infrastructure that will take longer than others, but I think in the assessment we'll get it out what needs to be prioritized at this current moment.
Can you give us an indication at this stage as to how much of the electricity supply has been restored? I know that as of yesterday we've seen teams are trying to restore cables that had been damaged in this fire. Is there an indication at this stage to quantify the areas around Knysna that's still without power as we speak?
We normally will get that feedback in our joint operation meeting that that it was already started. So numbers and percentages I cannot tell you now. I know a big area that is still out is the Brenton, Lake Brenton area side. Here and there's still streets that is out with electricity and water, but it's less. It's not. I don't even think it's double digits when it comes to the town, when it comes to electricity and others. So
when I spoke to the fire chief this morning, Clinton Manuel, there were still some areas around the Blaricum Heights area as well as the informal settlement. Can you give us an update with regards to whether there are any people, lives at risk at this point, or any properties at risk as well?
No properties at this stage. I think the Clinton has got it under control now. and he's got all of his teams out to make sure that we don't have structures, we don't lose another structure or even a threat to life. So I think at this stage we're quite comfortable where we are from a fire perspective.
Thank you very much, Richard Mayer there speaking to us. We've delayed him quite enough by now. He has to go into his meeting. Yes, thank you very much. So yes, Yeben, here outside the Knysna municipality, I can tell you that a planning meeting is currently taking place where these assessments as well as the extent of the damages to infrastructure will continue not just for today but for the rest of the week as Knysna and surrounding towns count the cost of this devastating blaze.
Vanessa, thank you very much for that update. Vanessa Pune in Knysna bringing us updates since early this morning. Thank you once again, Vanessa. Now we move down to Cape Town, and Metro Rail says their already reduced capacity has now been even further depleted. This comes after arsonists destroyed 8 train carriages last night at the Cape Town station. Angry commuters reportedly went on the rampage after train delays were announced a little bit earlier. Shops were also looted and damaged and access gates completely destroyed. Metro Rail says alternative bus transport was provided to assist commuters but were refused. Metro Rail's Rihanna Scott says further delays can be expected now while engineers assess the damage. Platforms 15 and 16 there are closed until further notice now. Now, actor Jabu Christopher Kubeka, who played the role of gunman in the SABC 1 drama Yizo Yizo, has died. Kubeka's body was found in his home at Shoshanguve late yesterday. It's been reported that he committed suicide. Kubeka also played the role of Bazooka Gumba in SABC 1's drama series Zone 14 and other TV dramas like Jacob's Cross and A Place Called Home. He also appeared in the soapies Generation, Zabalaza and Gold Diggers, as well as in comedies like Abumzala, Says Topla and Tandeka's Diary. The Minister of Arts and Culture, Natin Tetwa, has expressed his condolences to the family. Now we're going to shift our focus a little bit to the continent and South Africa's role on the continent. Now, ever since Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma bowed out of the African Union recently, there's been concerns amongst African political observers that since she has been replaced by a representative from Francophone Africa, the Anglophones in Africa may be sidelined. What does this say about South Africa's foreign policy towards the African continent and its encouragement of stable, accountable, democratic governments in other African states? Well, to talk to us about South Africa, we are joined by political analyst Mzokolo Mpolase. Very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you, Evan.
A whole lot said there. Where are we now as South Africa? Have we just dropped off the face of the African continent?
Somewhat. Because for a very long time, our strength lay in our economy, our strength lay in our history, and indeed our democratic principles. But the ground has shifted somewhat on that. We're no longer the biggest economy on the continent. Nigeria, albeit from debasing or rebasing, is now the largest economy on the continent, so we don't wield that much power as we used to have before. And indeed, when it comes to democracy, we found ourselves having our own internal contradictions. Corruption has since, I guess, been the mainstay of all activity in South Africa now. We've slid in terms of corruption's ratings or Transparency International's ratings of corruption. And indeed, we have our own contradictions of poverty, of, I guess, representativity and inclusiveness of South African society. So it becomes very difficult to be the regional power or continental power exercising, I guess, a sense of, I would say, localized imperialism, localized projection of our ideals, of our economy, and certainly of our political systems. So those contradictions have really put us in a bit of a twist.
I want to ask you about Pax Pretoriana, but before we get there, let's talk quickly about the kind of impact that the recent or the last couple of years, the sort of what's known as xenophobic attacks and the looting of foreign-owned shops, a lot of those being businessmen and women from other African countries. What effect do you think that has had on the sentiment towards South Africa?
Indeed, the xenophobic attacks or the general sense of xenophobia in this country has really contributed in this waning sense of our place on the continent. In that, you'd recall with the last xenophobic incidents, the rest of the continent showed us that they can also exact the same kind of punishment by either targeting our companies and indeed questioning the relationship that we have with the rest of the continent. And as I say, it all goes with these contradictions. If South Africa was indeed the stable, modern, democratic order, things like xenophobia ought to not happen, and certainly there should be more inclusivity in the economy. So that's what you would project to the rest of the continent, and it would be a pull factor for much of the continent and therefore our influence in the rest of the continent.
Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's term as the AU chair has just come to an end recently. Did she manage to change anything? Did she manage to change perceptions for that matter?
Not much, not much at all, because I would characterize her stint or term as AU chair as really being focused on, I would say, parochial issues. So she had her own pet issues that she focused on. Namely, there was a sense in the rest of the continent that perhaps Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was prioritizing local advancement as opposed to continental issues, in the sense that she was viewing herself as a person to succeed President Jacob Zuma, and much of her activity was related to that. And indeed, there were issues she championed at the African Union level, such as the African passport, but those things pale in comparison to what the continent had been facing from 2012 to 2017. So in here, I would include Ebola, where there was not that much leadership from Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Much of the political instability that we saw, whether it be at Burkina Faso, Burundi, and indeed the impasse that continues in South Sudan. So she had been found wanting in that regard. And then, of course, to cap it all off, Morocco's readmission, for example, where she was seen, I guess, acting as an agent of the South African government, as somewhat blocking that move because of South Africa's stance on the Sahrawi Republic. So a mixture of these things has, yes, I guess, change the order in that at the AU level there was a Southern African and Anglophone, because traditionally it was West Africa and Central Africa, so that has changed, but I don't think it has really changed the politics of the AU and certainly our standing in that forum.
I want to talk about this perceived Francophone, Anglophone split on the continent. There's always been this split, and South Africa's readmission, let's say, to African politics has it changed anything within that regard, or is that simply a figment of our own imagination, like our influence on the continent?
Well, the Francophone, Anglophone divide, whether we like it or not, whether it's an inherited, I would say, colonial remnant, it is true, and it does play itself out on the continent. We saw even in the succession question of who succeeds Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, it was Francophone against Anglophone. We saw that the Kenyans and Botswana put up candidates representing Anglophone, and indeed Central Africa and West Africa put up their own candidates. Indeed, they became victorious. And again, as I said, West Africa and Central Africa, that's where our past AU chairs had come from. And now we've sort of given the baton back to Central Africa in this regard. So it has its own politics, whether be it just at the AU level. It could just be, I've been in the rest of the continent just dealing with local meetings. Sometimes we have to divide people from certain parts of the continent according to their linguistic preferences, because we know there are political preferences that go with those linguistic preferences.
Finally, let's quickly talk about the money in the markets. We're always told, when Barack Obama, whoever comes here, tells us that this is the African century, that's ahead of us, and that the fastest growing economies are on the African continent, and South Africa has a key role to play in this going forward. Are we still that gateway that we would like to call ourselves?
It's interesting, gateway. Listening to the ANC subcommittee talking about international relations over the weekend, they said that the assumption is that if we're the gateway, then the ANC or the ANC government is the gatekeeper. So I guess for me, this has always been a contradiction. Yes, maybe a gateway to Southern Africa in that we've seen many companies, whether acquiring of Massmart, for example, by Walmart in order to advance their activity on the continent. Maybe many of the hotel groups are doing that. And much of the foreign direct investment that we get is towards this push. But insofar as our place in the continent, in its entirety plays, I would say the regional aspects still come into play. Indeed, we may be the second biggest economy, but you cannot speak of an African economy without looking at the regional dominant powers. So East Africa, there's Kenya, West Africa, there's Nigeria, and indeed ourselves, Southern Africa, and in North Africa, Egypt, and the like. So I think it is a lot more multilateral than we'd like it to be. Indeed, sometimes we overplay our role on the continent, but it is a contradiction, and it, to my mind, speaks to a deeper question of South Africa having to reevaluate its place on the continent and indeed what our economic diplomacy, I guess, strategy is in the grander scheme of things.
Forward to a multipolar world, we say.
Indeed.
Thank you very much for joining us. That's Mzokolo Mpolas, is a political analyst, and we're talking about South Africa's foreign policy on the continent and where we are right now. How has things changed? Very interesting views. Thanks once again for being with us.
Thank you.
We're going to take a little break. We'll be back with you on the Newsroom show right after this.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
This story is about what happens when we put our differences aside and we come together as a human race.
Salt makes its way out of the kitchen into the art studio.
Normally, salt is for food and stuff, but then here's salt.
The past couple of months, I've grown so much, and I'm just ready to impart what I've learned to the next Miss South Africa.
I wasn't expecting this. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I'm feeling so overwhelmed.
For your weekly dose of entertainment news, tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
It is 6 p.m. Central African Time, broadcasting live from Johannesburg. This is Primetime News.
South Africa said farewell to one of the Rivonia trialists, Uncle Kathy, a fearless stalwart.
With this man who was so engaged, so busy, so witty, so funny, so wise, and so incredibly principled.
Joseph Shabalala has been honored for his contribution to the South African music industry. A statue in his honor was unveiled during an annual gala dinner in Ladysmith.
The shot of the day, however, belonged to American Daniel Berger, who chipped in for an eagle on the par 4 fifth hole.
For all your news updates, stay on Primetime News every Saturday and Sunday from 6 p.m.
Now, the African superhero universe, yes, it's set to widen here in South Africa. Cool. Kwezi, which means star in Xhosa and isiZulu, is the brainchild of Luiso Mkhize, a designer and fine artist who got his start in comics as an illustrator for the long-running Super Striker soccer series. Now, the comic follows a narcissistic teenage boy named Kwezi as he discovers his superhuman abilities amid the daily hustle of the fictional Gold City, a bustling metropolis modelled after Johannesburg. Are we going to the DA press conference, guys? Looks like they're ready to get underway. We're not? Okay. Let's go to our parliamentary studios. We are joined by Luiso Mkhize, a visual artist and the creative brains behind Kwezi. Very good morning to you guys. Great to have you with us.
Having us.
Luiso, I see you with Clyde Beach. Good morning, Clyde.
Hi, how's it going, Eben?
Very good, guys. Just, Lisa, tell us about Kwezi. I think it's a super idea.
No, absolutely. Look, it's a project that's been a long time in the making.
we decided very early that we needed our own version of superheroes that we've been seeing from the West for so long, the Superman, the Spider-Mans. And we just decided that we wanted something that, a character that looks like us and speaks like us and shares our own environment, yeah.
Just how important is it to tell stories that appeal to real African readership? If I can ask both yourself and Clyde to give us an answer on that.
Well, we feel that kids need, one of our strongest pushing points with the comic was to create a comic that, like you said, kids can see themselves in, environments that they can identify with, and characters they can identify, people who look like them, people who talk like them, people who act like them, accents, gestures, the way they speak. It's very important to uplift the youth and the culture through those sort of visual stimulus. Loyiso?
Guys, I just have to stop you there. I'm going to come back to you. Please hang 10 there because we've got a very important development in Cape Town. Well, not in Cape Town, yeah, in Johannesburg, actually. Let's go to the DA press conference. Musi Mamani and Helen Zilla.
All of us, especially leaders in our society, must remain mindful that colonialism was not a victimless crime. Many South Africans suffered directly under colonialism and apartheid, and continue to be disadvantaged by the legacy of colonialism and apartheid. I was personally angered by the tweets that were put forward by Helen Zilla, and I know many others were as well. This is why I took immediate action to correct the impression that these were the views that were held by the DA. I wanted people to understand that, and without doubt, that under my leadership, the DA is working hard to reconcile South Africans, black and white, in pursuit of a common vision of progress and prosperity for all. And over the last few weeks, I've had several engagements with Helen Zilla on the subject of her tweet. We haven't always agreed on everything, and this is not necessarily a bad thing. I think, fellow South Africans, it's worth bearing that when I was elected leader, and I said this in 2015, that all of us are animated by the idea of building a better tomorrow. All of us carry the belief that out of the ashes of apartheid, a prosperous and a united South Africa can emerge. Sometimes we disagree with each other because we care too much about the future we want to build, and that is okay. It is healthy for us to engage in robust debate. But equally so, there is no room in this party for those who seek to divide or those who mobilize on race. We must challenge each other's ideas in a constructive manner, and for this is how we learn from each other and grow stronger. As leader, my job is to listen, it is to engage, and it is to set the political direction of the party. In the course of our engagements, Helen Zilla realized that her tweet and some of the communication that followed was hurtful to many people, and particularly black South Africans. Her acknowledgement of this is a huge step forward. It is important to me that Helen offered the South African public a fulsome and an unqualified apology. And I'm glad to say that she is now prepared to do that. Her willingness to admit wrongdoing and apologize is a quality that I believe sets her apart from many other political leaders in our country. Equally so, Helen has agreed that in the best interest of the party, for her to vacate her position on all decision-making structures of the party, including the Federal Executive, Federal Council, and Provincial Council. In addition, Her political communication from this point onwards will focus on matters relating to the Western Cape provincial government, where she will remain Premier. If she wishes to communicate on any other political issue, she will abide by the sign-off process and protocols of the Democratic Alliance. Fellow South Africans, our nation has a proud history of reconciliation, and we must, wherever possible, put aside our differences in pursuit of a common good. I believe this agreement, in fact, allows us to draw a line under what an unfortunate episode and to move on in the best interests of all South Africans. This has not been an easy decision. And I think the alternative would be for us as a party to be embroiled in a protracted legal battle and lead up towards the 2019 election. I have no doubt that this, in fact, would have caused further damage into the organization had we embarked upon it, to the detriment of the South Africans and ultimately to the detriment of the project of leading a reconciled democratic center of non-racialism and constitutionalism. We've made a massive progress in the last few years, particularly in the cities that we've won in 2016 election and now in a coalition government have the responsibility to govern in Joburg, Tshwane, and Nelson Mandela Bay. And South Africans are beginning to see the good fruit that comes out of that, of clean government, of better services being rolled out for all, and particularly for the poor and marginalized. The Democratic Alliance will build a future that is free of oppression, where every person has the opportunity to prosper and live a life of value and of dignity. This, fellow South Africans, is our historic mission, and we need to redouble every effort to make it a reality. I'm going at this point pause and hand over to Helen.
Thanks very much, Musi. I'll take that. Are you able to hear me at the back? I've never seen such a press scrum ever before. Good. After a period of debate and reflection, I recognize the offense caused by my tweet on the 16th of March 2017 with regard to the legacy of colonialism. I therefore apologize unreservedly to the South African public who were offended by this tweet and my subsequent explanation of it. In South Africa, colonialism and apartheid subjugated and oppressed a majority and benefited a minority on the basis of race. This is indeed indefensible, and I do not support, justify, praise, or promote it in any way. I realize the wounds of history that my tweet and subsequent defense of it has opened. In particular, I recognize that my actions were insensitive to South Africans who suffered under colonial oppression. For this, I am genuinely sorry. During this period, I have made public utterances that have had the effect of undermining the leader of the Democratic Alliance and the project that he is leading. I greatly regret this too. Mmusi Maimane is the democratically elected leader of the DA, and we must all get behind his leadership. My intention now is to do everything I can to restore public trust that has been eroded. Now more than ever, we need to unite behind a shared vision of one nation with one future. And that's what I have to say.
Right, friends, we have a very pressured program today, so we're going to take only 4 or 5 questions. I'll recognize you in random order. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Thank you so much. Tigi Madia from News 24. 2 questions, 2 very quick questions. Helen, the first one is to you. You're apologizing now, saying you kind of recognize the error of the comments you made, the tweets and the defense. Please help us understand why then did you continue with them? Because right throughout, people were saying to you, it is insensitive, people were saying to you, it's not accurate, and you're hurting many South Africans. Yet you continue to defend your tweets. So I want to try to understand how suddenly there's a turnaround. Secondly, Musi, the EFF has made comments about what they expect to happen. A lot of South Africans have also said they'd be happy to see the DA actually get rid of Helen, not only in leadership structures, but in the legislature as well, saying she's got to be removed as premier. And that doesn't seem to be the case. What are they supposed to make of that? Because a lot of people are saying they will not be happy, particularly the black people, including black leaders in the DA from Soweto, saying Helen has got to go. The DA has to choose whether it grows with us, the black majority, or if it respects and retains Helen Zille. Thank you.
One question, please.
Thank you. It's Tula Sizwe from ENCA. Musi, Tsidi has covered me in as far as the first question is concerned. How is what you are doing different from what the ANC does whenever President Jacob Zuma does something that's totally unacceptable? To say party unity. You're basically placing party unity above, what consequences should have been meted out to Helen Zille. And Helen Zille, my question to you is, recently you were asked by a radio presenter about your comments when you were saying that not all aspects of colonialism were bad. This presenter said to you, well, someone can say the Nazis in Germany also did some things, achieved some things, and you said there's no comparing colonialism with that genocide. I'd like to understand how the two are not comparable. Didn't colonialism lead to a lot of black South Africans, black Africans being enslaved, being killed, being tortured, being butchered? And didn't it lead directly to apartheid? And in that way, led to the deaths of countless people who cannot be quantified in terms of number?
Mr. Zille, sorry, you made a presentation last week to the DA's Federal Executive where you were very committed and adamant that you were going to sit out this conflict or fight rather. At what point over the last couple of days did you realize that it was futile, and what moved you to reach the agreement with the leaders?
Thank you very much, Clement Manyatela from Eyewitness News. Mrs. Zille, you now, I think you admit that your tweets violated many South Africans. Do you think an apology is enough? Also, in the reasons that you submitted to the Federal Executive, you pointed out that your suspension would do harm than good in 2019, and you said this would cause an embarrassment if you're not involved in caucus meetings in the Western Cape. Do you still hold this view? And do you still hold the view that if you are suspended from these party structures, there's going to be a negative impact on how the DA performs in 2019? And Mr. Mamani, does this have anything to do with what the EFF said? Thanks.
Good afternoon, Aldrin St-Pierre from SABC TV News. Mrs. Zille, in your submission to the FedEx, one of the submissions that you made was that the reason that this is happening is because that you are not white. Sorry, that you are not black, and that's the reason that you feel that the FedEx hasn't been following the procedures of the party and the constitution of the party. And the final question is, has anyone approached you to start your own political party?
Do you want to answer first, and then I'll just wrap up at the end?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks very much. Okay, first Tsidi's question. Why the turnaround? Every idea that I hold is provisional until a better argument comes up. I hold my ideas firmly, but the very process of evolution in anybody's thinking and in ideas in society is a result of engagement and discussion. And if you haven't got a closed mind, you come out of those discussions with a different way of seeing things. Now, the leader has called me in on numerous occasions. We've had a lot of discussions. I also have with fellow members of the party, and as I hope I always have done, have reflected very hard on what they have said to me and changed my position. As everybody knows, I can hold a position very strongly and I can argue the case very determinedly. But I am not impervious to good, rational, sound argument, because that is what all open-minded people should be. And so that is exactly why I reconsidered it. And the leader has also spoken, for example, about the road to reconciliation and what is required of it, that reconciliation is the project that he wants to lead. And I took that very seriously. Right, that's the first question. Then there's Tula Sizwe Simelane. Yeah. Look, if I was giving an academic seminar, we could go into this in quite some detail, but I don't think it's appropriate to do so. You may or may not know that a very large number of my relatives were murdered in the genocide of the Holocaust in Germany. And 9 direct uncles and aunts died in the death camps of Germany, and my parents were very lucky to survive as refugees. So the legacy also lives with me, and I understand it. Certainly, large aspects of colonialism had strong elements of genocide. But they are not directly equatable, and neither is defensible. Right, then what made me change my mind, Peter? That's what you asked me, hey? Peter, yeah, okay. What made me change my mind? I suppose my first instinct is to fight back. And my second instinct is to consider the methods. And my third instinct is to think what will be the best course into the future, and looking back in 10, 15 years, what will have been the best for our project. And it's a project that certainly Musi, the leader of this party, and I share completely in the vision for a prosperous country under constitutionalism, non-racialism, and the rule of law. There is absolutely no difference between us. Now, I have to think, in 15 years' time, what will have been best for this vision? And so when my first instinct to get a bald fist and fight back subsides, I can think a little bit more deeply and clearly about that. And that has been one of the substances of our conversations over the last couple of weeks. So I believe, A, that I did hurt a lot of people, and I believe that I am an empathetic person and I don't want to hurt anybody, although I don't shy away from tough debates. And believe me, people say very hurtful things to me, but that is no excuse for me to say hurtful things to people. That's the first reason. And the second reason is we've got a very big project to run in this country, and if it fails, South Africa fails, and I don't want to be part of helping it fail. I need to be part of helping it succeed. Then Clement. Oh, whether not being in caucus meetings is going to be a problem. Look, I do have to be in caucus meetings. And I don't think that caucus meetings are included. Provincial council is included, federal council is included, and the federal executive is included. And frankly, I think that's a good thing. I think it's a very good thing, because when you're the leader of a party, you don't want the ex-leader hovering around having opinions in places where decisions are made. I really think it's very difficult and probably not appropriate at all. So I think it is appropriate that I stand down from those bodies, and perhaps I should have done that long ago. But not out of a caucus, because a caucus is essential to running a good government. And we don't discuss general party matters, and it's certainly not a party decision-making body. It discusses DA policy in relation to legislation and what we are doing in the provincial government. So I don't think that that falls foul of the agreement that we've reached. So the first three bodies that I've asked not to be a part of, I think is absolutely rational and right, but I need to be part of the caucus, otherwise we can't govern properly. And then, oh yes, look. In a sensitively race-divided society, it is just true that who you are determines how what you say is taken up. For example, if a Jew makes an anti-Semitic remark, or what can be interpreted as an anti-Semitic remark, everybody laughs, but it doesn't work the other way around. And perhaps because of all the stuff I've been through, and because if anybody goes through my timeline, you'll see how rude so many people are to me, maybe I get a bit less sensitive than I need to be in replying, and maybe my instinct to take a firm line is not always interpreted in the way I intend it to be interpreted. I would never have survived this far in politics had I been particularly sensitive, and I would have never survived this far in politics had I been quick to take offense. And perhaps I don't empathize enough with the offense that other people take, but I also do believe very strongly that there are some things that the origin of the speaker makes a difference to what is heard. And I think this is one of those cases.
So my question on 2019 project, do you still think if you're not part of the party structures, the DA will have a negative, the DA will not perform well in 2019?
Look, I've never thought that if I wasn't part of the decision-making structures, the DA wouldn't perform well. Of course the DA will perform well. I mean, I don't need to be part of the decision-making structures for the DA to perform. I'm not the leader anymore. I stepped down two years ago now already. So the bottom line is my being in those structures has got nothing to do whether or not the DA performs well. If we run a decent government in the Western Cape, it will help the DA's project. And that is certainly what I'm very, very committed to doing. But I don't want to do anything at all that undermines this critical project. Because if we can't defend our constitution and build a non-racial inclusive society, then none of our children have a future, none. And that's what it has to be about.
So just a question on whether anyone has
Sorry.
approached you to start your own political party?
Well, I'm not going to tell a lie, yes, but I said no.
Thank you so much, everybody. And I just want to respond to just a few questions that were asked to me. TD, of course, many people will ask the question that we should remove Premier Zille. I think it's always important as South Africans to understand the context upon which we operate, the legal framework within which all of these take, and to further affirm the fact that I found the tweets offensive. They hurt many South Africans. They were a massive distraction for the party. I was very strong. I condemn all of those tweets. I also have to consider the type of government we run in the Western Cape. Helen Zille runs a good government. And in fact, in a world comparable to other premiers in society, I must then be able to consider whether or not that in fact Helen, in her job as the Western Cape Premier, must continue to do that. And therefore, her communication will be limited to that. The focus is that she must build a good government there. And I believe that without doubt, that when we lead a reconciliation project, of course, we're going to have different discussions. We're going to be angered by many statements. But we have a choice. We have to make the choice about reconciliation. I think it is what Nelson Mandela stood for. It is the idea that, in fact, even if we may disagree, reconciliation is always better because we're better together. I think that's important to take forward. And I wanted to ensure that the party can move on and focus on the objectives for 2019. And I do think the step that we've taken to ask Helen to step away from all decision-making structures, to limit her communication, and the apology that she's issued today indicates the very essence of how we need to take these discussions going forward. So, without doubt, Tula Sizwe, I think it would be unfortunate if we got into a discussion of saying what Jacob Zuma is doing and what Helen Zilla's views are exactly the same things. Jacob Zuma has been found to have violated the Constitution by the Constitutional Court. Believe you me, if the same finding was found about Helen Zilla in a Constitutional Court, this would not be the discussion we are having today. That must be very clear. That's the first thing. The second issue is simply this, that this question about party unity, in fact, goes broad. We must ask ourselves the question, what is the South Africa we want to see? What is the reconciliation project and where is it at? And therefore, if you sat with me and you said to me the best way we can go forward is to say, whether we disagree on statements or not, that we can't find adequate discourse, we can't guide the way forward, then I really fear, Tula Sizwe, that South Africa will suffer and set back this reconciliation project, which still remains critical. And ultimately, as I've maintained, that the work that Helen must do in government must continue, and certainly in the next 18 months, which I think is the term of office that's left, we must then continue to ensure that we achieve the objectives we've set out in the Western Cape. For if ultimately we are going to achieve anything in 2019, whilst other political parties have foregone this stance that says an unracial South Africa is still possible, black and white South Africans can work together and charter a way forward, I think that remains still possible. And when we steer away from that, I think we run a very dangerous risk. And we've got to act within what is appropriate and what is right for the project of reconciliation to continue. I think someone asked the question about a legal protracted battle, of course. Matters such as these ones also require sincere reflection and discussion. This is the South Africa we want. This is the country I want to build. And I think when we set out on a course and I began engagements with Helen, at first we couldn't find each other on this issue, but we needed to have a continued discussion. And I was very clear that I didn't accept what she was saying. And I think the apology she's issued today reflects that, in fact, in this way we can come to a point where we say, yes, it was unacceptable, and that she has apologized for. So in the question about the variables around the EFF, I think it's important that we note that yes, in this particular project, we have, if we're going to achieve anything in 2019, we need to govern well. We need to govern well in the cities that we're in coalition with. And I think without doubt, many other political leaders have said things that are completely outrageous. I think, in fact, even the leader of the EFF have said things that I think fall foul of the Constitution of the Republic. And therefore, when we take such actions, I don't get involved with the EFF's processes. And I think it'd be necessary for us to, when we, as the only party in South Africa that in fact still stands for both black and white, that we continue these discussions. Some are difficult, some are painful, but if we forego getting in a room and having tough discussions, I really believe we'll build a nation that is born out of an eye for an eye. And ultimately, the natural outcome for that is a blind nation. Mine would be to rather have a nation with open eyes, where we can open each other to our realities, to our histories, to our pains, so that we get to a point where we say, actually, to walk forward, this is the best way we can do it. And I would urge any South African that we must never lose touch of that project. And as difficult as this decision has been, I think we require courage as leaders to be able to stand up and say, we are never going to lose track of the reconciliation project. That those who want to pull us to extreme angles of this issue certainly don't help build the society we want to build. So I would urge that we focus on governing in Joburg, focus on governing in NMB, and ultimately, and focus on governing in Tshwane, recognizing that to achieve anything of substance in 2019, it will require the project of a reconciled South Africa where black and white can work together for us to govern as best as we can for the people of South Africa. That we must achieve. If we fail at those objectives, we will struggle. I think you asked me the question whether members of FedEx, this was not a decision about a contestation from one race against another. I lead an organization where there's a diversity of views. We've always had that. Some views are expressed by different South Africans. And I want to urge and affirm that even when I spoke to the federal executive and highlighted the nature of where this matter must go, what the project is about, and that in fact they members could give input to that, I felt the federal executive was unanimous in that decision. And yes, we start at different points, but we are better together in a reconciled South Africa, in what the father of our nation, Nelson Mandela, bequeathed to us, starts a journey where ultimately in 2019, if we are to succeed, it's got to be a success for all South Africans, not just for any particular race. For ultimately, my dream is that black and white South Africans can work together to address that historical injustice so we build a future for all. That is the DI I want to build. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Can we just open up here, please? We're not going to do any interviews. We're just going to... Let's go this way, guys. Let's go this way, guys.
Good aspects to colonialism. Are you apologizing for expressing the views, or are you apologizing for holding them? You still hold them. Have you changed your mind? Where there's good aspects to colonialism? Is that still going
Yes. Well, there you have it. That's the press conference. The Western Cape Premier Helen Zille apologizing unreservedly following a controversial post on social media about colonialism. Now, as you know, she was suspended following that tweet, which caused ructions in the party. The DA leader, Mmusi Maimane, says that Zille will vacate her position from all the decision-making structures, but she will continue as the Western Cape Premier. We'll bring you more of that story in a short while. Let's take a short break.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
What is environmental health?
In Section 24 of the Constitution, the environmental right has a second part, which is to encourage people to be active citizens and gives us the right to participate in politics and organize and raise awareness so that the environmental right can be guaranteed.
Using coal and wood and paraffin to cook with or to heat their space or to heat water. These are basic fundamentals, and I think if we can address that alone, we will make a huge impact, an environmental impact on the health of our population.
Food that comes into the country, the vigilance at the ports and harbours is being checked at the moment currently by environmental practitioners who are port officers at those ports. They need to be more stringent in terms of control of what comes into the country.
Join Health Talk every Saturday for all your health news.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at your headlines this morning. Well, As you heard there, the DA, Helen Zille, apologized unreservedly for her tweets, and she apologized to all South Africans about those colonial tweets. The Communications Minister, Yanda Dlondo, describes the process that led to the firing of Motsoeneng, Claudie Motsoeneng that is, as fair. And the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, is expected to open the National AIDS Conference in Durban. But what you're seeing there is, of course, Ben Ngubane that stepped down yesterday from PRASA. Those are your headlines. Top story this hour. The Western Cape Premier, Helen Zille, has apologized unreservedly following her controversial post on social media about colonialism. She was suspended following the tweets which caused ructions in the party. The DA leader, Mmusi Maimane, says that Zille will vacate her positions from all the DA decision-making structures. She will, however, continue as the Western Cape Premier. Zille said during a media briefing in Rosebank in Johannesburg that she apologized unreservedly.
After a period of debate and reflection, I recognize the offense caused by my tweet on the 16th of March 2017 with regard to the legacy of colonialism. I therefore apologize unreservedly to the South African public who were offended by this tweet and my subsequent explanation of it. In South Africa, colonialism and apartheid subjugated and oppressed a majority and benefited a minority on the basis of race. This is indeed indefensible, and I do not support, justify, praise, or promote it in any way. I realize the wounds of history that my tweet and subsequent defense of it has opened. In particular, I recognize that my actions were insensitive to South Africans who suffered under colonial oppression. For this, I am genuinely sorry. During this period, I have made public utterances that have had the effect of undermining the leader of the Democratic Alliance and the project that he is leading. I greatly regret this too. Mmusi Maimane is the democratically elected leader of the DA, and we must all get behind his leadership. My intention now is to do everything I can to restore public trust that has been eroded. Now more than ever, we need to unite behind a shared vision of one nation with one future. And that's what I have to say.
Leader, my job is to listen, it is to engage, and it is to set the political direction of the party. In the course of our engagements, Helen Zille realized that her tweet and some of the communication that followed was hurtful to many people, and particularly Black South Africans. Her acknowledgement of this is a huge step forward. It is important to me that Helen offered the South African public a fulsome and an unqualified apology. And I'm glad to say that she is now prepared to do that. Her willingness to admit wrongdoing and apologize is a quality that I believe sets her apart from many other political leaders in our country. Equally so, Helen has agreed that in the best interest of the party, for her to vacate her position on all decision-making structures of the party, including the Federal Executive, Federal Council, and Provincial Council. In addition, her political communication from this point onwards will focus on matters relating to the Western Cape Provincial Government, where she will remain Premier. If she wishes to communicate on any other political issue, she will abide by the sign-off process and protocols of the Democratic Alliance.
Well, that was the breaking story right now. But back to our main story today, which is the axing of the former SABC COO, Claudie Motsoeneng. The Communications Minister, Yanda Dlodlo, has described the process that led to the firing of Motsoeneng as fair. Dlodlo is currently appearing before the Communications Portfolio Committee in Parliament.
Mr. Motsoeneng has been fired. Basically, there was a disciplinary process that, in my view, with the report that I got from the board and with my concurrence, was a process that was fair. It's a process that took into account many things that had been raised both by the ad hoc committee that was established to look into the issues of the SABC. It took into account many things that had happened in the South African Broadcasting Corporation, including court judgments, including the Public Protector's report, and issues that had been raised by the Portfolio Committee itself on broadcasting. So out of that, a decision then was taken that both the minister and the board agreed to what was presented to us by the presiding officer. So this is an era now that is behind us, because what was implored upon us as well by SCOPA when we presented before SCOPA was also to look at the suspension of the CFO. And I did mention to SCOPA that we will not take a decision on the basis of public requests, but we will take a decision based on what we would have looked at in terms of the performance and the behavior of the CFO. So that process as well has been embarked upon. So he is under suspension as we speak.
Well, the minister also talked about the bailout for the SABC.
Have not totally discarded the possibility of bringing someone in, even if it is from the other entities, just to hold the fort for now. And for the simple reason that if you go and ask for funding somewhere, you will be told that, and this is the discussion we've already had with the Treasury, that you cannot expect a leadership team that has presided over the mess of the SABC to be the same team that now receives funding and is expected to take the process forward. So it's basically a decision that I think is the correct decision. If you're wanting to bring people in and you are asking for money, that money does come with conditions. And one of those conditions is going to be that. So I just thought from a proactive perspective, we need to take that into account and ensure that we assist the SABC to be able to look into certain things.
Well, there might be a bailout, but that's why we're asking you the question today on the poll. Let's take a look. We're asking you, is Claudie Motsoeneng sacking good news for the SABC? Well, so far, 343 votes in, and very close still. 62% of you are saying, yes, it is a good thing for the SABC. There's good news there. 27% says, I don't care, which is very disturbing. And 11% says no. Now, the 11% probably belongs to friends of Claudie, who was voted there. 343 votes in. You can keep them voting, and we'll read some of the comments that is associated with this question a little bit later. But right now, let's take a break. We'll be right back after that.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Media Monitor. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. What has been happening on the digital front?
To win the CAF Championship was a huge thing, and perhaps we ought to have celebrated him even more.
Absolutely.
73% of our schools, regardless whether they're in the township or they're in urban areas, if you go to those schools, you are guaranteed a matric pass.
It is the one thing that we haven't done well as a country. We have thrown money at it. I mean, if you ask for figures, you'll be told we're spending well in education.
90 billion.
But the performance of the system has not been good enough.
If we can join our hands together against the ills of our society, we can build a better nation. One youth, one South Africa.
Subsequent to the frenzy caused by the recent robberies to malls and shopping centres, last week the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry held an anti-crime discussion to find creative, workable solutions that would enable a long-term plan to end the scourge of mall robberies and crime. The dialogue was facilitated by the Durban Chamber, who outlined that it is a civic responsibility to help fight the scourge of crime. Now, to talk to us about the outcomes of the dialogue, we're now joined in our Durban studios by the CEO of the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dumile Cele. A very good morning to you, Mr. Cele, and welcome.
Good morning, Elvis. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
First and foremostly, tell us what gave rise and why was there a need for this particular dialogue?
Elvis, as you know, that as the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, we have members who are businesses in eThekwini, in Durban, and the scourge of crime currently is really hurting our businesses. And I think the situation in our economy is really beginning to be affected. So for us, it was important that we have this multi-stakeholder dialogue about how are we going to combat crime in Durban and do that together. So the Durban Chamber of Commerce, with its businesses, was able to have conversations with other stakeholders, government, law enforcement agencies, communities, to begin to say, how do we join hands to fight against this absolutely devastating situation that is not only causing us commercial damage, but is also really
affected the businesses there in Durban?
You know, between 2014 and 2016, we saw an increase of about 3.5% in terms